Good afternoon. You're welcome to a Tree Talk special where myself and Matt O'Callaghan will be looking at a huge weekend in the Limerick Hurling Championships. We're going to be talking through the senior, Premier Intermediate, and Intermediate hurling finals this weekend. So do stay tuned for all that and more.
The impression again we get out with what you put into. It's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
But not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Shawnee Buckley. To do that to Tomas O'Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the word go today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Carey. Carey leading the charge of the right brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it high.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.
Good afternoon, Matt. How are things with you on this Wednesday? I suppose.
Very good. Looking forward to what's a fantastic weekend. Tis a pity, I suppose. They'll say we're always grumbling, but that that it's so condensed, like that. We've 3 major finals in 24 hours. It's but it's what would we have given for it when we were in the middle of a lockdown?
Yeah, exactly. And we didn't know if we'd get there, but we got good news yesterday as well. I suppose. Well, relative good news with the government that full stadiums are coming back. So I think that's in place for the weekend, that we could potentially have a full house and get a crown. Now that's not going to happen for club championship games, but restrictions are eased with county finals to look forward to. It just shows the growth of the country, I suppose, in the last 6 or 8 months.
Absolutely, but these numbers are still slightly worrying. These case numbers, and there was a bit of a surge in ICU overnight, and in my simple mind, I'm adding 2 and 2 and all this, and I'm not getting 4, because I cannot understand. We're proclaiming to the extent the efficacy of the vaccines and how successful they are, and how we're world leaders in terms of percentage of people vaccinated, and the number's still scaling. I just don't get it. I have to say, but it is worrying. But I suppose what we are mainly concerned with in the GA and in sport in general, Jack, is that we're lucky in that we are an outdoor pursuit, and that it is relatively much safer than in the inside. But you still wonder where all these cases are coming from. Like that, they're talking about 2/3 of the people in ICU and 2/3 of the people in hospital. They're unvaccinated, and that's all very fine, but a third of them, they're still breakthrough cases, So I don't know. I just hope that we're not facing into more restrictions and another lockdown, So we've got to live with this thing, and I suppose we've all got to be careful. And it's terribly important that everybody that goes to the Gaelic grounds on Sunday, and everybody that goes to Newcastle West on Saturday, or indeed to any venue where there's games on over the weekend, that they take the necessary precautions. The self-responsibility and it comes very much into play at this stage. Like, basically, I think the powers that be are saying to us that from Friday it's over to you, lads. You look after it yourselves, or you look after it yourselves. So we just got to wait and see. But look, to have 3 games at the weekend is such a contrast. But to have the games that we've had, Jack, not just this weekend, but since games resumed, it has been absolutely fantastic. And if anybody thinks that we're coming to the end of the line at this stage, they ain't seen anything yet, because there is so many games to be still played at under 21 level, and other competitions to be finished. We're heading in at the weekend. We'll see the conclusion of the divisional Junior B competitions. They're finishing in the city tonight, and the south and the west are finishing on on Saturday, and the Easter already finished. So come Saturday evening, the lineup will be completed for the quarterfinals of the Junior Bs. And why am I saying that? Because that in itself is another step forward, because we didn't have a Junior B competition in 2020.
Yeah.
So it didn't go beyond the divisionals, and the divisions in some cases didn't finish their competitions until this year. They were delayed. So that in itself is progress. But look, we appeal to everybody just to take the necessary precautions for another couple of months. We've been through this now for 20 months almost. And like another couple of months, we may come out of it. So it's a prize worth chasing. And we know both sides of the coin now, Jack, and I'm not going to labour the point anymore. We know what it's like to be without games, and we know what it's like to be with them. So let's go for the latter.
Yeah, and one thing is for certain, that we'll definitely have the three hurling games this weekend, which will take up the most of today's podcast. But the message stays the same: just stay safe, get out and support these games in outdoor arena sensibly, and we'll all enjoy these, because we've been to the Gaelic Rounds the last weekends, Matt, now, and there's been great crowds there, and there's been no negative reports coming out afterwards, which has been brilliant. And we'll start with the senior final, Matt. It's Limerick's showpiece event, Kilmallock versus Patrickswell. The first time they're going to play in a county final for 29 years, which is mad, really, when you consider just how successful the teams have been in recent years. 4:45 on Sunday in the two Gaelic Rounds. It's live on TG Cahir, and I suppose maybe we won't start talking about the teams individually, but overall, they've had a very similar record, Matt, in the last 12, 18 months. They both won both their group games last year, lost in the semi-finals. This year, both lost their first game, won their second game, backs to the wall. In the quarterfinals, it looked like neither was going to progress, and they both did. And in the semi-finals, they were comprehensive. So, it really makes for an even match, Matt.
It does. It's intriguing when you look back at their passage over the last 12 months, and that their performance in the respective championships in 2020 and in 2021 to date. So, look, there is very little separates them. But just an overall comment that it is surprising. Kilmallock made the breakthrough in 1960 when they won the championship for the first time. Patrickswell won it for the first time in 1965. And in the 61 years, Jack, since Kilmallock won it, these two clubs have won 31 titles between them. Patrickswell 20 and Kilmallock 11. That is more than one every other year, which is absolutely phenomenal. And when you factor in then that this is the first final in almost 30 years since they have met in the final. So, and if you throw in into the middle of Patrickswell's record between 1965 and 2003, they had won 18 of those titles. 18 of those titles. They then went a 13-year lapse without a title. So it'll give you an idea of what these clubs have achieved. But you're absolutely right. And after the first rounds, first rounds are first rounds, because if you analyse the defeat of the respective teams, Patrickswell played the entire first round match with 14 players, which was a huge handicap. Still only lost the hurling match by a point. Which I suppose that there was a message in that, if we were prepared to take it on board. But of course, we all tend to get carried away by the underdog and say that Doomsday has arrived, at last, and all that sort of thing. Take the Kilmallock game. Going down the home straight with 3 minutes left, Kilmallock were 3 points behind. They lost the game by 10. A late flurry by Napiershik. Now, the late flurry could have gone the other way just as easily, Jack. The game was delicately poised. Now, they came back, and whilst Patrickswell experienced little or no difficulty in beating a Han, Kilmallock played their get out of jail card and were damn lucky to beat Ballybrown.
Yeah.
You know, it was like Ballybrown did everything but win the match.
Yeah, and I think it's not to cut in there now, but it's kind of been a feature for Kilmallock this year that when the chips have been down, it's a lot of time it's been an individual that has stood up and grabbed the game by the neck. We'll say it was Micheál Houlihan against Ballybrown. It was a mixture of him and Oisin O'Reilly against South Liberties, and it was probably O'Reilly again last weekend. So we'll talk about Kilmallock in depth, Matt, that they haven't been at their best, but they have probably improved incrementally over the first few weekends. They were very poor out of the blocks against the Pearshig. They were slow against Ballybrown, but hit their stride late on. Against South Liberties, they were against a really strong South Liberties side. They were really put to the pin of their collar, and they got through it. But against Doon, from start to finish, they were much the better team. So they will be delighted where they are coming into this game.
They were, and they did so, as you say, with fellas stepping up to the plate. And you must remember to this point of the competition, for various reasons, we haven't seen, the main reason being that he wasn't involved in the first two games. We haven't seen the best of Graham Mulcahy. You know, and that's a secret weapon that Kilmallock carry into the final, because I was just looking at the Kilmallock forward line. It's a very potent forward line. Look, all the attention might be focused on Micheál Houlihan and Oisin O'Reilly, but you must remember David Wolfe chipped in with 3 very useful points in the semi-final very early on. You have Graham Mulcahy. What about Gavin O'Mahony and Kevin O'Donnell?
Yeah.
Kevin O'Donnell, since he came back in with a starting for a starting place, he missed part of the first 2 games. Like he's back at his very best. It's been a revelation, absolutely a revelation. So, like it's a very, very potent Kilmallock forward line. And you know, we've been talking through the campaign, and we've been talking about particularly the and I know we'll be talking about him in a minute, the Patrick Swell full back line, you know, and that the potential for weaknesses there, which by the way we haven't seen in it hasn't manifested in the competition, you know. But you would have to say that they will probably be up against a very, very, like if Kilmallock go with the inside 3 that we think they will, and that they probably will, of Graham Mulcahy, Gavin O'Mahony and Kevin O'Donnell. What a reservoir of experience between those 3. You know, if there's anybody to exploit any weaknesses in there, they certainly will have the wherewithal to do it. So, but it's a very, very potent Kilmallock forward line. The question will be to ensure, of course, that they get the supply. And then that will mean that a certain amount of responsibility will fall on the midfielders, who have done very, very well. Both are All-Ireland medalists. Aaron Costello seems to have discovered a new freedom since he came into midfield. And it is noticeable for those runs that he is making and finding space. And Robbie Handley is just Robbie Handley. Absolutely rock solid. So, like, right, you talk at the defence. Barry Hennessy is Barry Hennessy. Fantastic goalkeeper. But the question mark about the defence is, and how did they concede 5 goals against South Liberties? And the question is, why didn't Doon try and exploit it? It didn't happen because they weren't, in fairness, in the semi-final, Jack, against Doon. They were never seriously tested, were they? Particularly in the first half, when any vulnerability before they would settle into the game should be there. But like, I don't think Doon went looking for the fault lines, you know. Now I know Philip O'Loughlin
though either, Matt, because I think Kilmallock just hit the ground running fairly quickly and were just so dominant. I think Doon probably weren't able to get enough ball to penetrate to the defence. I think it works both ways, that Kilmallock laid down the marker so early that Doon just couldn't get into their game. And
yeah, I suppose there was a bit of the mantra of attack is the best form of defence.
Yeah, well, they certainly work from when they
Yeah.
picked up 4 goals.
Now you had Philip O'Loughlin in the week telling us that that he considered that some of the South Liberties goals were very well crafted when we put that point to him, and of course he's right. There was a couple of the Liberties goals like that. They were very, very well crafted. But you see, there's going to be a nagging doubt there. When you have fellas like Keane Lynch and Am Galan, and we saw the kind of form that the O'Briens are in at the moment. You know, they're going to test that. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, we'll touch on Patch as well just in a minute. But just on your just talking about Kilmallock team as a whole, in defence, I suppose I think the kind of the younger lads have really stepped up to likes of Liam English and Kieran O'Connor, and I think the O'Loughlin brothers without Paddy, Mark and Philip have really stood up as well. So there's kind of leaders all over that with Paddy O'Brien as well on the wing, has so much experience. But the role of Aaron Costello has been very intriguing, I think, this year in midfield. Now, he'd probably be named in the backs, but he's played predominantly in midfield. Between himself and Robbie Hanley, they offer a huge energy in the middle of midfield, and they'll probably have a role with Keane Lynch is probably going to drop into that area. So is Aaron Costello, would you want him on Aaron Galan, or would you be happy to let someone like Dan Joy or Liam English pick him up and let him play in midfield?
Yeah, I think that that Dan Joy was very, very good in the semi-final.
Very good.
You know, like Dan Joy, we must not forget, he's an All-Ireland medal winner in 2017 at under 21 level. So, like he has a lot to bring to the table. Like he missed the game through injury. We saw him getting the knock. He came off, but I think he came back better than ever. Like Kilmallock are spoiled in the number 4 shirt. With the choice that they have between Dan Joy, which is probably his best position, and Adam Costello. So I honestly think that they're going to go. I think the energy that Adam Costello brings and the work rate that he brings around the centre will be would probably be more important in curtailing an area in which Keane Lynch is likely to inhabit during the game. And that Dan Joy will probably pick up Aaron Galan.
Yeah, there's fascinating matchups, and while we're on about matchups, we might as well move on to the Patrick's Well side, and I suppose starting goals with Brian Murray. I suppose he deserves a mention by himself because he has been outstanding, and if it weren't for his block on Mark Connolly in the quarterfinal, Patchwell wouldn't be here.
No, it was an absolutely fantastic save, and he had a couple of very good saves as well against Na Piarsaigh at important junctures in the game. Like he's a goalkeeper for the ages. He just is. He just seems to go on and go on and go on, and he's Brian Murray is like old wine. He's getting better with age. Jack, are you into wine? Are you?
I wouldn't drink any wine now myself. I'm more a fan of Pepsi or something like that. But yeah, Brian Murray has been incredible.
Sure. But he's the epitome of consistency over the years, and like, you know, what a voice and what a stalwart to have behind your defence. Like it's one for the ages, really. You know.
Yeah, and on that defence, then they've been much maligned, and I suppose it's not really a reason for it, especially this year. And they're looking at their performances, but the 6 that will probably line out will Sean O'Brien, Nigel Foley, and John Flynn, the full back line, and then with Tom Nolan, Diarmaid Burns anchoring at 6, and then Josh Considine. Now that half back line speaks for itself, and the full back line have, as we said, come under much scrutiny, but they've really stuck to the test. Now they will probably get their hardest test this weekend, even though they played in the Piarsaigh, or even though they played Doon in the last round with all the forwards they have. They did so well on Doon, and I suppose the role of Philip O'Loughlin and Adam English kind of summed it up, that he scored 2 points from play, and I don't know if Adam scored from play at all. If Kilmallock need just get on the front foot straight away, we're talking about Patrick's Well here. Sorry, I got mixed up there. They need to look at the likes of Mial Houlihan and Oisin O'Reilly to stop them get going, because they're really streaky players. If they can get a run on you and get scoring, they'll go to town. So for Patrick's Well and Kilmallock, I suppose it's about the defence getting on top straight away.
Yeah, they'll probably have learned from the semi-final against Doon, and I'm sure they'll probably have watched it back and will ensure that the space that was allowed with Doon sitting back will not be allowed on this occasion, because like if you give Oisin O'Reilly a foot, literally, he'll punish you because he has blistering and searing pace, and like the amount of space that he got, and once he's on the run, as we have seen, Jack, he's very, very, very hard to stop. And the same is true of Micheál Houlihan. Now, Micheál Houlihan's performance in the semi-final wasn't as good as it was in the previous 2 games from play, which is another bit in which is more in the bank for Kilmallock coming into the final. But you see, Patrick's will have, as I mentioned already, the Kilmallock full forward line is extremely strong, extremely experienced, and you have a more youthful looking half forward line. Now, Dermot Burns will be there, Josh Considine, Tom Nolan. Like they're all going to be tested now. In my opinion, Dermot Burns is in the form of his life.
Yeah.
The form that he showed in both of Limerick's All Ireland victories now in the last 2 years, which is top class. He has brought it and more to Patrick's well. Of course, he's the team captain, and certainly he's leading from the front. When they lost to Doon in the first round, he was the leading scorer with 8 points.
Yeah.
Now, some of them were from long-range frees, but there was a couple from play as well. So,
long-range frees don't score themselves either, though. Someone has to hit them.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you have somebody of the caliber of Dermot Burns stepping up to a long-range free, it's that little bit of extra ammunition in the tank, like that's very, very important.
Yeah, and I suppose touching on individual players, there's a question there from the Shelminator just on the club player of the year. I'll touch on that with you after we go through the teams as a whole. But in midfield, then for Patrick well,
but before we move there from the defence, like I have to say, I have been impressed with Josh Considine.
Yeah. In
the present campaign, I think he has settled in well at wing back, and in many ways put up his hand to John Kiley for a possible recall to the panel. I think Josh is having a very, very good season for Patrick's well.
Yeah, and I think with Josh and the midfield that they play with Mark Carmody and Calvin Carroll, Mark has obviously played a lot of his hurling in the backs that they can, if it's not working out, they can switch out. Carmody's probably more of a man marker than Josh Considine is probably more of a runner, but there's a nice blend there between Calvin Carroll and Mark Carmody, hard working but very clever on the ball, and you can see that from Carmody playing in defence, he knows what ball the forwards like, and Calvin Carroll has played in the forwards himself, again, knows what kind of ball to give. So they dovetail well, but then against Robbie Handley and Aaron Costello, they're not going to have real much breathing room, are they?
They're not, but Mark Carmody has been pitted against the best for so long now, and he rarely he's much kind of a clone of Brian Murray's. Much of the same now. I know he's probably a more recent vintage in that he was involved in 2011 in that Munster final win over Cork at the Gaelic grounds. But Mark Carmody never fails to deliver for Patrick's well, whether he's in defence or whether he's at midfield. I think he's had a new lease of life around midfield this year.
Yeah, he's been excellent. And then I suppose I have a comment here just from Adrian Kelly. He asked a few questions last week. Josh Considine versus Robbie Handley will be a good battle. I don't know if they're going to match up like that if Josh's in the wing back line, but there's so many matchups. And then Patrick's forwards, it's probably 8 or 9 into 6. I suppose the last day starting was Tom O'Brien, Keane Lynch, Jason Gillan, Kevin O'Brien, Aaron Gillan, and Patrick Kirby. But you could also have John Kirby or Jack Keller in that forward line. And we spoke about it, like they are serious forwards to have. Like they're all inter-county standard. And obviously the standout are Keane Lynch and Aaron Gillan. But we saw Jason Gillan take the game by the scruff of the neck in the quarter-final. Kevin O'Brien was named man of the match in the semi-final. And I think Thomas O'Brien has been on fire all year. Just a brilliant forward line.
Yeah, I agree with you about Thomas O'Brien. You second guessed my next comment, Jack. In that while all that was happening around him, Thomas O'Brien was having absolutely huge influential games for Patrick Swell. He's having a wonderful season as well, and you're right. When Patrick Swell sit down to pick their team, when it comes to the forward line, 1 to 9 will probably be as it has been in the semi-final. But when they'll come to pick the final 6, it's then whether which sextet will they go for? You'd have to say that Thomas O'Brien, Cian Lynch and Aaron Gillane are certainties.
Yeah, and I'd add in Tom O'Brien.
The two O'Briens.
Two O'Briens and Jason Gillane into that. So it's probably
Jason Gillane, is it a battle of the Kirby's and a battle of the Kirby's or Jack Kelleher?
I think that's the way it falls, but I suppose it goes nicely into another question by Adrian: who is the stronger bench, do you reckon? And to be fair, no disrespect to the Kilmallock bench, they have some fine players come on, the likes of Killian Hayes and Robbie Egan, to name a couple. But
Conor Staunton.
That Pashwell bench is very strong. Like, obviously 2 out of that 8 aren't going to start. Keane Fitzgerald showed the impact he can have when he came on the last day. Paddy Maher was starting when they won in 19. So for me, it has to be Pashwell have the stronger bench. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with it. Yeah, that they have certainly slightly the stronger bench. There's no doubt about it. As you said, Paddy Maher was a starter 2 years ago. And I suppose it's indicative of the strength of Patrick Swell that he cannot get in the first 15. And like you're going to have a Kirby, and you're going to have possibly Jack Kelleher, or will they rejig around from 7 up?
I can't imagine with the way Calvin Carroll and Mark Carmody are playing in midfield. And I think it's good that teams have players coming off the bench. But Kilmallock have shown that the bench is probably a bit weaker, but the players that start, they, like against South Liberties, they only made a couple of subs and they played 80 minutes. And then the following week they played 60 minutes against Doon with no bother to them. So having a 2-week break, Kilmallock could easily play that 15 for the whole game. Now, you do want fresh legs inside there, but they have immense fitness that will get them past probably having a slightly weaker bench.
Yeah, and you're right, Jack. You're right in what you're saying, in that if apart from the names and apart from the personalities, if you're talking about impact, and this is what you need, impact subs like that, certainly Patrick Swell would seem to be in a better place than Kilmallock in that regard.
Yeah, they would. Before we get to predictions and stuff, Matt, there's a stat here from the Shellmaker that the 39 on Sunday had the greatest number of All-Irelands between them in the county final ever. I don't know how true that is. I'd imagine the Ballyhale or the Kilkenny finals with them great teams. Kilkenny probably had more, but
I'm presuming he's alluding to a Limerick final.
Oh, definitely a Limerick final. Like, just looking at the teams there, Barry Hennessy obviously has one. Robbie Handley has a couple. Graham O'Cahey has 3 at this stage.
Oisin O'Reilly has one.
O'Reilly has one. Aaron Costello has a couple. Then for Patrick Well, you have Darragh Burns, Josh Constantine, Cian Lynch, Aaron Gillane, Jason Gillane. That's 10 in my count, and I've definitely missed out someone. So there's a lot of All-Ireland, and then I suppose there's 5 All-Stars on between the sides as well. With Brian Murray obviously won one in 2007. Cian Lynch and Graham O'Cahey won ones in 2018. Cian Lynch has got a second one. Aaron Gillane has picked up 2. Darragh Burns has 1. He'll definitely add to it later this year. So there's just an abundance of talent on show, Matt. But the bookies have it that Patrick Swell are favourites. They're 1-2 versus 15-8 for Kilmallock. But which way do you see this game playing out? Because for me, like I don't know, could I call it? I think my mind is going to change a couple of 100 times between here and Sunday.
Yeah. My mind isn't changing every day, Jack. It's changing every minute of every day. When I think of it, I agree with the bookies. Patrick Swell are favourites, but I was hugely impressed, I have to say, with the way Kilmallock, on 2 occasions during the campaign, in back-to-back games, their backs, excuse the pun, were to the wall, particularly against Ballybrown and against South Liberties, and they dug it out. And I was hugely impressed with the way, having played their get out of jail card, not once but probably twice, the performance that they turned on in the semi-final. And whilst I think that Patrick Swell are favourites, I'm slightly leaning towards Kilmallock.
Yeah, I'll push you there in a while, but just on that, I really struggled to say one team is going to win because, as you said, Kilmallock have shown that resilience, but also Patrick Swell have shown that resilience against the Dare. Like it's such a hard one to call, and we might come back to that one later on, Matt, and give us more time to rest in it. I did want to come to this question from the Shelminator earlier, who you thought was the club hurler of the year. She mentioned Micheál Houlihan, Willie Griffin, the young Kirby. I suppose either one, Pat Urjan could be in there. But for me, like I'll just name out a couple, Matt, and you can say what you're on. But for Pearly June, I think Adam English actually the first time. I think Chris Thomas was very, very good over the course of the year. Obviously, Micheál Houlihan and Oisin O'Reilly have been excellent for Kilmallock. I suppose for Killarney Palace Kenry, I thought Kyle was very good. So was Darren O'Connell, especially in the final. I off the top of my head, I suppose for Patchwell, I think Darren Burns, as you mentioned, has been their stand up there by a mile. Even though Keane Lynch will be hurler of the year and definitely deserves it. I think Darren Burns has been probably the best player out of the three that we so often come to talk about. But I think if I was to call it, I would say between Oisin O'Reilly and Thomas O'Brien from Patchwell, because I think Thomas O'Brien goes under the radar. I don't know for what reason, but he does seem to go under the radar. I think he's been exceptional. I think it's between him himself and Oisin O'Reilly for me. How would you see that?
I wouldn't disagree with you with the names you've listed, but were I to make a choice, and I have the utmost admiration for what Thomas O'Brien had done, but has done, and indeed for what Micheál Houlihan has done, which has been fantastic. But if I were pushed on it, it would come down for me to a choice between Oisin O'Reilly and Dermot Burns. I think Dermot Burns has just simply been phenomenal, and you must remember, Jack, that Dermot Burns is the team captain, and here is a man leading from the front, if there ever was one. The example he's given is absolutely phenomenal. So it would, and they may very well be matched up on Sunday.
Yeah, I'm sure they will cross paths.
Yeah, and that could be a deciding factor if we're to decide who the hurler of the championship was.
Yeah, and we will do all predictions at the end of the year, like we did last year. But I suppose whichever team gets over the line, generally the best player of the championship will come from that team, and generally they'll have had their say and they'll be fully deserving of it. But we'll move on from the senior final just for a while, and we'll come back to it when we get to predictions. The curtain raiser that day, Matt, is the Premier Intermediate Hurling final between Mungret St. Paul's and Cappamore at 1:30. It's live on Limerick TV if you can't make it in. And I've stressed during the week that it's a curtain raiser in a name, and that's about it, because I know the two of us have been real advocates for this Premier Intermediate Championship over the last 6-7 years, and for anyone that hasn't really paid attention to it and probably focused on senior or where their own club is at, like the Premier Intermediate Championship, Matt, has been the standout championship for the last 6-7 years, realistically, hasn't it?
It has, Jack. No question about it. And we're going to have an 8th winner in 8 years on Sunday, whoever prevails. Now, both of them have been tantalizingly close to it before. I think it was 2016 or 2017. Cappamore went down narrowly to Monaleen in 2016, actually. And then we had Mungret St. Paul's coming so close last year. So, like that they're not exactly strangers to the final, and certainly not. It's in many ways it's been a fantastic. It's been a fantastic journey in the last 10 years for Cappamore, or would say the last 15 years, because they were relegated. And just an interesting aside about Cappamore. Cappamore in 1964, Jack, were the first club to represent Limerick in the Munster Clubs Championship. They were the champions of 64. So But what has that got to do with Sunday? I'm only just saying about the deep tradition that's in Cappamore. But by 2009, Cappamore had found themselves in junior ranks. And that's not very long ago in hurling terms. It's 12 years ago. And like when you look at it then and see like that, in the meantime, since 2009, they won the intermediate championship. Was it in 2012? No, sorry,
13 or no, that was
13
late.
in or around that. And then they were promoted, as we said, when they were runners up, when it was 2 up, 2 down in 2016 with Mona Lean. Had a couple of years at senior level and are now back down, and the renaissance continues. And throw into the mix the fact that they won a Limerick and Munster Junior Bs in 2018, and were only beaten in the All-Ireland final by Islegate Glenbrine, with a team now that contains some of the players that have made the step up to the intermediate team. So, like, at the start of the season, I don't think that Cappamore were even mentioned in dispatches as being like the contenders. But when you see what they have achieved during the year, and when you look back and try and analyze where how it happened, like a cursory examination is enough to get your answers. But one thing, and this is down to the randomness of the draw, Jack, is that in the Premier Intermediate Championship this year, now we got good games in both groups, but it was lopsided in terms of standard, in that the group which Mungret and Cappamore came out of was much stronger than the other group. And that was borne out in the semi-finals, when Mungret St. Paul's were far too good for Glenroe, and that Glenroe team that pushed them to the very limit 12 months ago. And it isn't that Glenroe have gone back. It is more that Mungret have progressed. And then you had the huge win that Cappamore had over Newcastle West in the other semi-final. So that gives you an idea when the groups are crossed, how strong a group that they have come out of. So both sides are going into Sunday's final really battle-hardened from the group stages. Now, Mungret St. Paul's are going in unbeaten. Cappamore are going in with 1 defeat. And that was to Mungret St. Paul's by 2 points. So it sets it all up very, very, very nicely. And as we were talking off air, Jack, you're very, very right. This is the 4th meeting between these clubs since Cappamore returned from senior ranks. In 2019, Mungret were handsome winners over Cappamore in the first round, and that was in the six-team format. Last year, when they met in the championship, it ended in a draw. This year, when they met in the championship, there was only 2 points between them. So it really, really is set up for Sunday.
Yeah, it's definitely set up for a real good game. But touching on Mungret there, you've mentioned they're unbeaten. They've won each of their games alongside Effin. They're the only team to win all their games so far this year. You saw them in the semi-final, and they've been progressing for the last few years now. In 16, they won the intermediate. The same year that Cappamore went up to the senior ranks, Mungret went up to the Premier Intermediate ranks. So they just missed out there. But they were relegation finals 17, 18 and 19 semi-finals. They were obviously beaten in last year's Premier Intermediate final. So they have been building progressively, and they've started adding in a few players. And this year, the likes of Barry Duff, Brian O'Mara and Liam Lynch have really settled in well. You saw him against Glenroe, and you were obviously very impressed with him.
I was, and we spoke in earlier podcasts this year in the context of the senior championship about Kildimo Pallaskenry and their progression up through the ranks. In many ways, Mungret mirrored that, because this year's semi-final against Glenroe was their 4th in a row. They lost the first 2, they won the 3rd one, and were beaten in the final. and here they're back in the final again. So are they going to be like step by step, gradually, even though there has been a bit of a turnover on the team? But certainly, mentioning the players that you mentioned there, I was very, very impressed with them. I've been hugely impressed by Liam Lynch. First year up from minor. I know he has 2 Munster minor medals in his locker, but he certainly is. He's a strong player, a very good player, and of course, they were hugely boosted in the semi-final by the return of Paul O'Brien. Yeah. And Paul O'Brien really announced his return in spectacular fashion by putting the ball in the Glenroe net after 3 minutes. So it was back to business as if he had never been away before. Yeah, I'm hugely impressed with him. Patrick Begley at centre back is sort of the fulcrum of the defence. But if you look all over the field, they have players of real quality, and I think they're going to be very difficult to beat. But you know, we know what Cappamore can bring to the table.
Yeah, and before we get on to Cappamore, there's a comment in here. Odds on Niall Carey, first goal scorer. Obviously, in the first, I think 3 weekends, Matt, he had 5 goals. You're mentioning his name every weekend. Are you going to give odds?
I'm not. He didn't get a goal against Glenroe.
No, that's the Glenroe defence was too tough. But talking there's another comment in here from Adrian Kelly. He said, I think it's Liam O'Donnell. I'm very sure as well. It's Liam O'Donnell on the frees. Cappamore, very accurate. A decent free taker will be huge, and it will be, because I remember Blackrock against Kildare Planiskenry 2 years ago was essentially a free taking competition between Sean Barry and Paddy Leahy, and they finished level. But on Liam O'Donnell on the frees, I think he got 7 from 7 against Mungret. You have Bill Kramer in that forward line, and Joe Lonergan got goals as well against Mungret. So Cappamore do have firepower, and their centre back John Ryan, I'm talking to him before the game, like you can just see the determination in their faces, in their eyes. Like they won't fear Mungret in the slightest, and they've no reason to, because the games have been so close to them.
They won't fear him at all, you know. Now Tommy Ryan is gone out of the goal this year after a long innings there, and he's been replaced by, is it Sean McMahon? Yeah. And you have 2 stalwarts there forming the spine of the defence. Peter O'Brien at full back, and as you mentioned, John Ryan at centre back. You know, and then you have fellas like Con Berkery and Bill Kramer. And what about Tommy O'Donoghue, who wasn't getting into the team in the early games, but what a sub to have. But he started in the semi-final, and what experience he brings to the table. So, like, in that regard now, you know, Tommy Ryan and Brian Coffey stepped back this year from intermediate hurling anyway. But certainly some of the new players that have come in, there's Tig Ryan, Sean Whelan. There is a name now, excellent with Limerick Minors in 2020, and seems to have successfully made the transition to adult hurling. You have a guy called PJ Hogan at midfield, and you have our friend Liam O'Donnell, who the contributor is just after mentioning a while ago. Yeah. So, like in terms of youth experience, they seem to have got a very, very good mix.
Yeah, they
and
have...
fellas like John Ryan, Con Berkery, Bill Kramer, and Tommy Donoghue, an awful lot will rest on their shoulders in the wide open spaces of the Gaelic grounds, which are probably slightly more suitable to the way Mungret play, in that they like to play the expansive open game. So look, you know, we can be surprised all we like about Cappamore being at this stage of the competition, but Jack, they deserve to be there, and that there is a reason for they being there, and like they were convincing winners over Knockcaney in the first round and probably put down a marker. Now they were pushed to the limit probably by Maru Boher, and of course, Jack, that isn't a bad thing. we've been talking about teams, and I thought we spoke about it in the context of the football semi-finals last week, when we spoke about St. Sinnans in particular and Gerald Griffins, when we were saying like that they hadn't got tests tough enough coming into a semi-final, and that was the case. But certainly the fact that they got a tough outing from Marubor, and it came at an opportune time in that it was practically a de facto championship, a knockout championship game, depending on the result of Mungret and Knockcaney the same day. So look, that galvanized them, and it was exactly the type of game that Declan Deere and his management team would have been looking for going into the cut and thrust of knockout championship.
Yeah, and then they showed that against Newcastle West in the semi-final. And again, I'll leave you time to rest on this one before I ask you.
And you can liken it to Kilmallock. You can liken it to Kilmallock. The tough games against Ballybrown and South Liberties didn't do them one bit of harm.
No, if you can come out of any game with a win is a win at the end of the day. And when you get to a final, that's all you need to do. If you win 1-0, that'll do the lads in Cappelmore. Equally will do the same for the boys in Mungret. But I'll come to you with predictions.
And well, if they win by 1-0, and whether the masses like it or not, they won't give one damn.
Yeah, and for all 6 teams in the finals at the weekend, it's all about winning the finals, and that's what you play for, is to win finals. And the other final we have, and the first final we have, so it'll be the first piece of silverware, if you don't include the County Cup, and I'm sure Kildare Pallaskinnery won't mind us saying that because they would have been going for the Daily Cup. But the first piece of silverware proper that's up for grabs is the intermediate hurling championship. We play between Effin and Croke Kilfinney, and even though it's extremely novel final, I couldn't find when they last played in championship, if they ever have. There's a lot coming into it history-wise with Croke Kilfinney, obviously junior champions going for back-to-back promotions, and the last team to do it was Effin, the last time they're in the intermediate final. So I suppose for Croke, like, they are riding the crest of a wave over the last 18 months, Matt. They won all their games in the junior last year, even though they had to wait probably the bones of 6 or 7 months to finish their campaign. Didn't pay any heed to that. Beat Paxwell well in the final, won the intermediate league, have won 3 of their 4 intermediate games, and have remained unbeaten. But they play Effin, who, like Mungret St. Paul's, have won all their games in the form of their lives since they were in the intermediate championship. We'll start with Effin, Matt. I suppose last year they lost in the Pearshig, lost to Kilmallock, and went into a relegation playoff. What changed this year for the South Side?
There's obviously an infusion of new players. I've spoken in the past here about Patrick O'Donovan making the transition. Like he scored 2-9 in the semi-final, wasn't it? 2-6 from play. There's young players coming in there like Sean Canning, Fergal O'Connor, who's a Munster minor medal winner as well. And if you get young players in like that, it's a huge boost. But you must remember that they're coming in around vastly experienced players. Now, and another plus factor for them was the return of Conor Carney, who was abroad and who was a member of the Munster winning team in 2011, and he has slotted in very, very nicely now into the half-back line. So there was a lot of positives coming into the season, and I suppose reason for Effin to be optimistic about the season. But if you look at the team that won the Munster Championship, they still have got on their side, they've got James O'Leary, Patrick Carroll, Michael Ray, now Conor Carney, Tommy Quaid, Pierce O'Kelly, and of course a certain Mr. Nicky Quaid.
Yeah.
Like, who is in the form of his life as if he was ever out of it. Is absolutely peerless at centre back. So if you have a guy like that organising your defence, and his brother Jack Dinn and Tommy and Patrick O'Donovan leading the attack, it's a very, very Effin are in a good place, and it's a big turnaround for them. Like if you go from relegation to being in a county final, it is some turnaround, and they have achieved it. But it isn't again, like we spoke about Cappamore, but it isn't a great surprise. Now I saw a couple of their games last year. In the group stages, I saw both of their games against Kilmallock and the Piercing, and I have said this before in this medium a couple of podcasts back. Whilst they lost both games, they were unlucky to lose both games. They could have won both games.
Yeah.
So we could be talking about a different story. All right, that they were pushed hard enough when it went into the relegation, but these relegation things take on a life of their own.
They do, and they'll definitely be happier where they are in 2021 and have been exceptional. And you mentioned a lot of players. For Croke Kilfinney, it's been a dream start to life in the Intermediate Championship, but they're in a final now, and when you're on momentum like this, like you have to take advantage of it. The pressure is probably off Croke Kilfinney, but they will be desperate to win while they're on this crest of a wave and get up to Premier Intermediate Championship ranks for the first time in their history. I'm very sure this is their first ever year in Intermediate Hurling, but they're flying, Matt.
They're absolutely flying, Jack, and we did make the point, and you can listen back to it in the commentary of the county final, that I made the point at the time that I thought they were well equipped to hold their own in at Premier or at intermediate level. But if I'm honest, I didn't foresee that they would be involved in the final or at the concluding stages of it. But I certainly knew that they weren't going to be anybody's whipping boys, because the configuration of the team was such, and the way they were playing, they looked as if they were ready for it. Sometimes you see these teams winning county finals and being promoted, and you know damn well that they're not ready. That 12 months' time they'll be struggling to stay there, or worse still, even down. But I never thought that was that was going to be Croke Kilfinney's fate. Now they've had a fantastic season, and I suppose one advantage they have probably, Jack, is that first of all, and you alluded to it there, despite the long delay between the quarterfinals and the semi-finals of the Junior Championship, they were able to pick up on the form that they had shown, because I think the general consensus was, when the championship was suspended last year, that if it wasn't restarted or finished, that Croke Kilfinney would be the big losers. Like they were many people's favourites, and you wonder then with the COVID, the lockdown, and all that sort of thing, when they came back, if they would be able to pick it up. And the answer was a very emphatic yes. But you see, it gave them a slight advantage, Jack, in that with the momentum that they had from the Junior Championship, rather than having to carry it over from one year to another, all they had to do was the West Intermediate Championship and the County Intermediate League immediately clicked in. And when that was over, the championship clicked in. So it was like one championship campaign. So they just didn't have to recapture the momentum that was there. Now, Sunday's final is going to be, it's going to be totally different. First of all, it's a final. It's going to be a very, very, very big occasion, but they have been through a big occasion as recently as a couple of months ago in the junior final, and making a breakthrough isn't always easy. So, but I think they're very, very well equipped, and I don't think there's anybody can argue but that Croke Kilfinney and Effin deserve to be the county finalists.
Yeah, they definitely, there's no doubt about that. They have been the standout teams. You touched on it there, Matt, but how important is it for Croke that they've very recent experience of a county final? It's very rare you play two county finals in the 1 year in a championship, and that for Effin, their last time in a final was 10 years ago. There's like, obviously the Quaids have remained, but there is a big changeover in the side. Like, nerves shouldn't be a factor for Croke, whereas they probably will be for Effin. Now, there will be some semblance of nerves for every player. That's natural. But Croke have that experience, very recent experience of playing in the final.
They have, and that's the point I was making, that, you know, the fact that if they had won it before Christmas and trying to pick it back up when they came back after the year, you know, it would have been more difficult. But I don't agree with your point that nerves will arise for Effin, because for the reason that I've told you, there's 7 or 8 of the players that have won Munster medals with Effin.
Yeah, that's
You
fair,
know,
but just
they're
so
not
long
going
ago.
to. And very interestingly, they won a very, very good Munster final against Ballyduff of Kerry in Newcastle West.
Yeah, and obviously I don't know if I said it, but that game is 2:00 on Sunday in Newcastle West. That's streamed live by Limerick JTV. So all the county finals are available to watch at the weekend if you can't get out to them. The senior finals on TG Car, Premier Intermediates on Limerick JTV, as is the intermediate final on Saturday. That game again thrown in at 2:00. We'll move on from the hurling for the weekend just for a few moments, Matt, and then we'll get back to predictions. But I suppose at the weekend just gone, we had plenty of football action, and we have the launch tonight, and we'll talk about them in depth next week in a preview of all the finals. But just to allude on the semi-finals in the intermediate championship, I suppose I did pick Kildimo and Rakiel. Whether I was full sure that they'd come through or not is a different story, but a surprising duo to come through, definitely, when you look at the Start Championship, but definitely both deserving of their place in the final, Kildimo Panis and Rakiel.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've seen Rakiel, even though I felt that Gerald Griffins, having lost the last 2 finals, you know, might have got over the line on that particular one. But I was hugely impressed with what I saw about Rakiel, about the way they went about it, and like they obviously are a serious team, and you know, their win over Gerald Griffins. My understanding, I wasn't at the game, but that from those that were at the game and reading the match report, you know, that they were full value for their win, as were Kildimo Pallaskenry as well. But we worried particularly about Sinnons coming into the game, about their lack of a real test, and felt that there was a real test coming last weekend, and it came. And unfortunately, from the St. Sinnons point of view, they didn't pass it. And but it has been a rags to riches story for Kildimo Pallaskenry footballers. Like they were they were promoted in the 2018. The first 2 years that they were up at this level, they were just hanging in there, Jack. Just hanging in there. But they've made a spurt for the line this time, and by God, I'll tell you, and I know we'll be discussing it in depth next week. It's going to be one hell of a final.
Yeah, and just touching on Kildimo Pallaskenry there, I spoke to Peter Nash after the game, and you can see that on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, wherever you're watching this, and you can just sense from Peter, like, the amount of work that's gone in Kildimo Pallaskenry and the pride in the club as a whole between hurling and football. It was just lovely to hear. But again, we'll touch on that more next week. Another game we'll be looking to is the Premier Junior final.
It would be very, very interesting. It would be very, very interesting next year, where Kildimo to be a dual club at senior level.
Yeah, because we've obviously lost Napiershig and Monaleen as dual clubs this year.
Yes.
So it could only be Kildimo and Adair, just off the top of my head, yeah. So very interesting to see. But the Premier Junior final will be contested by Father Casey's and Newcastle West. And with both of them being second teams, Matt, it's thrown up an interesting game this Friday night in Mount Collins, where the hosts will play Croom to see who plays in the Junior Munster Championship. And I suppose for Croom, it's the same as 2019, if I'm correct, when they lost to Monaleen and they went into the Munster Championship, and I think they reached the final. But it's very disappointing for both teams. Obviously, would have liked to get into intermediate ranks, but we could have a situation where the Munster Junior champions will be in the junior grade next year. But for Croom and Mount Collins this weekend, a small something to look forward to after the loss.
Yeah, and they had contrasting fortunes in the semi-finals, in that Croom lost to a late goal, whilst Mount Collins staged a late rally. They at a stage when they were 2-13 to 1-3 down going into the second water break, and eventually lost 2-13 to 3-6.
Yeah.
So like they rallied late. I just don't know, Jack. If I'm honest, I don't know how these teams are going to approach this game.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a surreal experience, and one that I don't recollect we have seen before, a playoff for a place in the Munster Championship.
No, it is rare to have two second sides. But again, I think it just shows the strength and depth in Newcastle West and Father Casey's. And obviously, Newcastle have a senior final to look forward to next Friday, and the Premier Junior final then on Sunday to look forward to. But again, we'll be touching on them games in depth next week. This weekend we have football.
But you see, they've come out of a group, and we've said that before. They've come out of the same group, Father Casey's and Patrick's Well, or Father Casey's and Newcastle West, and like they had only one group game. In that Hospital Helberstown, who were the third team in the group, withdrew, and were subsequently relegated. So, like they haven't had a pile of activity. They've had quarterfinals and semi-finals, let's say, but I don't think there's probably, you can't argue with that right to be in the final.
No,
whatsoever. Like it gives you an idea of the strength and depth of both clubs.
Yeah, and when you hear some of the names, I just heard a few of the Newcastle names that were playing junior. It just gives you a sense of how strong they are, and I'm sure Father Casey's are the same. And interestingly, Newcastle got the win in the senior championship. Father Casey's will definitely going in for revenge in that. But we also have ladies football this weekend, Matt, and we're into the knockout stages across the top tiers. We have the quarterfinals in the senior and intermediate championship. So you've defending champion St. Ailbe's looking for 3 in a row. They play St. Bridget's in Cappamore. All games on Sunday at 11 o'clock. Fiona Castleman play Old Mill in Athay. Ballylanders and Monaghan await in the finals or semi-finals. We'll look at them games first, Matt. We talked about it the last day when the fairings were made, but St. Ailbe's and Fiona Castleman will be favoured. Now, Old Mill have showed glimpses in the championship, but St. Bridget's will definitely be needing a performance, unlike the ones they've given so far, suffering 2 heavy losses.
They will. It certainly hasn't been a great year for Bridget's. A heavy defeat to Fiona Castleman in the first round, and then a defeat to Monaghan in the second round against St. Ailbe's, like who haven't won in the championship, but haven't lost in the championship. In that they have drawn both of their games, and Ailbe's this year are chasing 3 in a row. And it's very, very hard to see him being derailed in the quarterfinal by St. Bridget's for the reasons that I've said. The other game is probably a bit could go down to the wire, Jack. It's not a foregone conclusion anyway. Fiona Castleman had a big win over Bridget's, as we said, but then they suffered a heavy defeat to Monaghan.
Yeah.
Now, Old Mill. And we were wondering about Old Mill last week when we were reflecting back on their final group game. Like they drew with St. Ailbe's and shifted a 6-goal defeat to Ballylanders, a Ballylanders team who had drawn also with St. Ailbe's.
Yeah.
So you just wonder where Old Mill are at, but you would have to say probably that Fiona Castleman are favourites.
Yeah, you would have to say that they are favoured, but as you said, either game could go either way. But you would fancy Ailbe's and Fiona Castleman. I suppose intermediate quarterfinals. Then you've Father Casey's versus Ula and Knockany versus Maruboher, and you've last year's final pairing of Drumcolor Broadford and Munger St. Paul's safely through. So how do you see the quarterfinal pairings, Matt?
I think Ula have been making great strides in recent years, and they had a good win over Knockany in the first round, and they lost to the champions Drum Bradford in the second round, and I think they're in a decent place. Now, Father Casey's were very, very competitive in what was a competitive group, but they lost both of their group games to Mungret St. Paul's and to Maruboher. So, like Mungret St. Paul's, after the first 2 rounds, had safely nailed down the semi-final spot, letting Maru Boher and Father Casey's to fight it out for second and third place. Now, in the other quarter final, you have Knockeny against Maru Boher. Knockeny have lost both games. They lost them to Ula and to Drum Broadford, whilst Maru Boher had the win over Father Casey's. I'm going for the 2 East teams, Jack, in this one. I think Ula and Maru Boher should come through in these.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. And on the Junior A Championship then, that's obviously a 5-round group stage, so they're not into the quarterfinals yet. It's Celtic Gales versus Adair. Both teams have won all their games so far. Celtic Gales are 3 out of 3. Adair have won both theirs. And a hand versus Screwdy Gales. At the other side then, both teams looking to pick up a win, which will be a vital game because it's only one group, Matt, and the bottom team is the only team that doesn't get through to the semi-final. So regardless of what you do in the group stage, you will have a chance if you don't finish last, essentially.
Yeah, I suppose you'd have to say at this stage, Celtic Gales and Adair have really nailed it down at this point. And it's going to be a huge game. And 'tis on in John O'Mahony Park in Kilbehenny, I think, on Sunday at 11 o'clock. It'll be one of the big games of the weekend. Now, it isn't a knockout game; it's just a group game. But in terms of form coming into it, it's certainly one of the games to look forward to.
Yeah, both teams are looking down to lay down a marker because if they keep going to there, they will avoid each other in the semi-finals and will meet in the final if they keep going. But that's all hearsay. And I suppose in Junior B Championship, then you've Mona Gay's second side versus Ula B. Croom versus St. Senans in Group 1. Croom can make it 3 out of 3 and as good as book their place in the semi-finals in Group 1 with a win over St. Senans, with a big win over Jar Griffins last weekend, or 2 weekends ago. And then Palace Green versus Father Casey's B and Drumcolor Broadford versus St. Ailbe's, both second sides in Group 2. Drum and St. Ailbe's have won both their games so far, so the winner there will take control of that group. Again, that's 2 groups of 5, so there's 2 more rounds in them games. So they need top 2 go through in there. So that's a really competitive.
Yeah, but I suppose if you look at the Junior B Championship, one of the surprises is not who's winning, but who's not winning in the decline in the football fortunes of Gerald Griffins.
Yeah.
Who up to a couple of years ago, like they won that famous junior final that was played at 9:30 in the morning in Knockeny a couple of years ago, and they've been one of the powerhouses in recent years, but they seem to have fallen on lean times in particularly this year.
Yeah, they have. That's the junior or the ladies football for this weekend. I suppose we have Camogie to look back on, Matt, and we'll look at more in depth next weekend. But just to reference what the state of play is like. So these are the results from last weekend's game. Ahan beat Crocora to move through. Newcastle West beat Bruff to cement their place top table, even though they were guaranteed first spot. And then Granagh Ballingarry beat the Piershig in that winner takes all tie. So what that means essentially, Matt, is Ahan move on to play Killeedy in the semi-final. Newcastle West will play Granagh Ballingarry, and then Crocora will meet Na Piershig in the B final, with the losers winning, or the winners winning the B Championship, and the losers playing Bruff in the relegation final. So a real action-packed weekend, Matt. But I suppose the final 4 we were probably leaning towards at the start of the championship in last year's finalists: Newcastle West, Killeedy, and Ahan and Granagh Ballingarry.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is an exact repetition of the semi-final pairings of last year. And I suppose Limerick Hurling isn't the only one probably that's dogged with the top 4, the same 4. It's becoming a bit in the Camogie Championship as well, but I don't think anybody can argue with the merits of it. Really going into the final round, I suppose Newcastle West were home and hosed before a ball was poked. They went to Bruff, did the job with 10 points to spare. There was a bit of an issue whether between Ahan and Crocora. That it was a knockout game actually in many ways, and Ahan did the business there and did it quite comfortably. But the real game of the weekend was Granagh Ballingarry against Na Piershig. and you know, we were wondering, both clubs had run Killeedy very, very close. And you know, obviously there has been a decline in the fortunes of Granagh Ballingarry from a couple of years ago when they won, was it 5 county championships in a row, and we were wondering last week whether there was a revival up and running in Granagh Ballingarry, you know, and you nearly have to say there is that Na Piarsaigh are a coming force. There's no doubt about that, and like it was a very, very, very good win. But of course, the real test for Granagh Ballingarry and as to where they're at will come when they meet Newcastle West, who I suppose and they probably won't forgive me for saying so, Jack, who on form in the group stages must be championship favourites.
Yeah, if you're just considering this year, and I suppose they were in the final last year and winners the year before, Newcastle West are on a roll. But Killeedy, as we said earlier in the podcast, it's all about getting wins, and Killeedy did that. They got their 2 from 2, and I suppose they'll have an extended break. They'll have 4 weeks waiting for that semi-final, which could come back to haunt them. We've seen in the past with teams, but it could also re-energise the side as well. We look forward to all those games next week, probably in more depth, Matt, when we look at I suppose it's a big weekend of football next weekend. We have the intermediate final next Thursday, the senior final the following night, and the Premier Junior final on Sunday. So from one county final weekend into the next, Matt. But for
now, on Wednesday there is the under 19A hurling final between Coshley Gales and Naomh Eoin.
When you remarked earlier on in the podcast,
Coshley Gales are a combination of Staker Wallace and Effin, and Naomh Eoin are a combination of Hospital Herbertstown and Knockkenny. So quite a bit of South Limerick involvement in that one.
Yeah, and while we're on topic of under 19s, St. Kieran's are crowned under 19A football champions. Last night they beat Croom in the final, but that I saw that St. Kieran's side there, St. Kieran's Monaghay amalgamation, they're very strong side. They played Ballyseen the first round and won well, and Croom beat Ballyseen in the other semi-final. So well done St. Kieran's on that.
Beating Ballyseen is pedigree in itself, Jack.
Yeah, like
just like their under 19 hurlers beat Glenroe, so that's pedigree too.
Yeah, and it'll show if they win next week, they had to come through the hard way through us in the quarterfinal. But before we finish today, Matt, we have the small matter of predictions to look at. I'll just get up the table here. At the moment, you're still out in front. You're 5 clear. It was a poor enough weekend for us last week, Matt, when you consider we chose 9 games. We chose from 9 games, and we only picked up 4 each. I got both the semi-finalists in the intermediate. We both had a dare then to win into the promotion, and we bypassed that, Matt, I suppose, today. We can talk about some other time. Adair got over South Liberties at 20 points to 114. You had Newcastle in the Premier Junior. We both had Croom to beat Father Casey's. Both had St. Pat's. You had St. Kieran's, and then neither of us had Ballybrick and Bohermore or Caroline to come through as well. So an eventful weekend, Matt. You're 5 points clear. We'll just do the 3 championship games this weekend, the 3 finals, and we'll start with the intermediate championship, Matt. Crokilfinney versus Effin. By the way, you kind of had earmarked Effin from near enough to start championship, if not beforehand.
Yeah, I had absolutely, and I'm like Croom last week now, and they nearly came to pass, Jack. But I'm going for Effin by 3.
Effin by 3. I'm going to side with the West Limerick side. I'm going to go with Crokilfinney by a point, and to emulate Effin in going back-to-back in the junior and intermediate championships. The following day, then, the slow-call curtain raiser between Mungret St. Paul's and Cappamore. I've been going for Mungret St. Paul's to win out the competition since 2018, realistically. They fell at the penultimate hurdle that year, and the following year, last year, they fell in the final hurdle. Will they get over the line this year, Matt, or will it be Cappamore's turn?
I'm going for Mungret by 4.
Yeah, I'm going to go for Mungret by 5, and I think it'll be a close game, but I think if Mungret are to win it, they'll win by more than a score. I think if Cappamore can keep them within a score, that they'll nick it in the end, if not win by more than that. But it should be a close contest, definitely. And then the main event, Matt, Patchwell versus Kilmallock, and we were both humming and hawing a while ago. I suppose, who do you think will win, by how much, and where will the game be won and lost?
Kilmallock by 2.
And what's the reasoning for that? No matter, is it just
Well,
you just give it?
I touched on it there a while ago. They came through the couple of tough games against Ballybrown and South Liberties, and I thought they were hugely impressive in the semi-final. Now, I've the utmost respect for Patrick's Well, absolutely, fantastic side. But I feel that the Kilmallock attack will probably shade it. And I would be expecting a big, huge impact from Graham Mulcahy.
Yeah, well, he has been probably the standout club player over the last decade or so, and he'll be going for a 4th county medal. But I think that Patchwell will just outshade it, and it's very hard to go against Kilmallock because, as you've said, whenever they've been up against it, they've come through. But with Keane Lynch, Aaron Gillan, and Dermot Burns in a club side, they're going to have their say at some stage, and if they can catch form, no side will stop them.
I agree with you totally on that. But then like you've Graham Mulcahy, you've Rob Handy, Aaron Costello, Barry Hennessy, who's worth a couple of goals. But you've goalkeepers there that are worth a couple of goals every game to their side.
Yeah, and like even Barry Hennessy's long range free take and Tiernan Burns will be equal to that. Michal Hoolan is every bit the free taker. Aaron Gillan is at centre forward. Even though Keane Lynch has been on fire all year, Oisin O'Reilly has probably been better in the club championship. So they do match up really well, Matt.
Really well. Tis like it's just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and if you ask me after the Mungret and Cappamore game on Sunday, I'll probably have a different answer for you. But for now, I'll go Patchwell by 2. You're saying Kilmallock by 2. It could be a draw. It probably is looking like a draw, but it'll finish with extra time on the day, definitely. So if they win extra time, we'll give it the points to whoever picks right. But it's a great, as we said at the very outset of the podcast, Matt, what a weekend to look forward to at the end of the day.
Absolutely unbelievable. It's going to be an unbelievable 24 hours.
Yeah, and
look, we have the relatives of the earlier in the day on Sunday. We have the relatives of the 1921 All Ireland winning team being honoured, and also during the day, and you probably saw it during the week where Limerick GA have come up to with the idea of making Sunday's final a very, very special occasion, and there will be a number of side events. The Liam McCarthy Cup will be there, and there'll be a chance for kids to get their photographs taken with the McCarthy Cup, and there will be a carnival atmosphere in the Gaelic grounds on Sunday. And for the price of your ticket, you'll be getting more than a good hurling match. And the 1996 team, who were so unlucky, will be introduced to the crowd at half time. So there's a lot of pageantry and a lot of side events, and it's going to be a special occasion. And we would exhort as many people as possible to turn up. The full ground, I presume, will be open on Sunday to ensure as much social distancing as possible. But like, it has worked very, very well in the Gaelic ground so far in the competition, Jack. And like there was a very, very, very healthy crowd at the 2 semi-finals. I'm hearing there's a crowd nearly of record proportions. So. Sunday is going to be a very, very special day. I don't know if there's going to be face painting. Do you want to get your face painted, Jack?
I will, sure. If it's going, I'll get my face painted.
I might go in for it myself to be an improvement, But no, but seriously, there is the Liam McCarthy Cup is going to be there, and it's going to be about the kids, and make it a special occasion and a memorable occasion for them.
Yeah, and the Limerick Senior Hurling Final is always a memorable occasion, and this one is probably that bit more special because we'll have more. I think there was only 200 last year's final, and we'll have 20 times, if not 50 times that amount there, this weekend, which is brilliant to see. So, episode 100, I think 60. This episode was, Matt, is in the books. A special on all the hurling. Look, again, huge thanks to you, Matt, and I'll see you on Saturday in Newcastle for the first of our 3 county finals, Effin versus Croke. in Newcastle, Saturday 2 o'clock. Mungo St Paul's versus Cappamore in the Premier Intermediate final Sunday at 1:30, and then the big one, the Limerick Senior Hurling Championship final on Sunday, Kilmallock Patrickswell in the Gaelic Grounds at 3:45. So until then, Matt, thanks very much, and we'll talk soon.
You're welcome, Jack.
The impression the game you get out with what you put into. It's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
But not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Shawnee Buckley. To do that to Tommaso Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the workout today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Carey. Carey leading the charge of the right brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it high.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.